Hello, everybody, and welcome finally to the franchise show for a Tuesday. And you know what? It's been a Tuesday where I've had some stresses, but it's turned out to be the most amazing show ever because I had one legend on. I've now got two absolute legends on the show. So I am absolutely thrilled and delighted. Oh, I forgot to do my catchphrase. Hold on a second. This is the show where we get under the hat of some of the most important topics in franchising. So what do we do? Each week we take a new topic and we take a lovely guest. And this week we have two amazing guests. And we spend a little bit of time having a chat about a topic. Today's topic is how to sell a franchise in all its guises. Do we sell it? Do we award it? Do we align people to the right franchise? How do we go about doing this? And it's a great subject indeed. And this is a live show as well. Well, it's certainly live if it's about 5:30 in the UK, about 12:30 somewhere in the US for about 50 minutes or so. So please, if you're here live, put up your questions, put up your comments. I'm going to put a few of those on the screen in a minute. But before I do that, I'd like to hand things over to these two fine gentlemen to make a little introduction. I'm going to start with yourself, Ed. If you could introduce yourself. Most people know you, but please make a little introduction before we get into things today.
Cool. Well, I'll keep it nice and short. So I'm Ed Purnell. I'm the founder of The Franchised, and we help franchisors to fine-tune their franchise recruitment and amplify their growth.
That was neat and nice and short and perfect. And it's exactly why you're here talking today about amplifying growth and, aligning people, potential franchisees with potential franchisors. Fantastic. And Joe, my friend, I remember watching and listening to your audio version of what I do many, many times. And you're somebody that I've wanted to have on the show for a long time. Great to have you here. And please give yourself a little introduction as well.
Fantastic. Glad to be here, Ed and Harvey. I am Joe Caruso. I am partner in a company called Franchise Info with Ned Lyerly, the former CEO of Hardee's and Carl's Jr., and Michael Webster in Toronto, Canada. He's a former franchise attorney and technologist and platform strategist. And we work with franchisors domestically in the United States. We work with operations platforms for franchisors, and we help franchisors that are interested in expanding in the United States from outside the United States. I've been doing franchising for 30 years. I worked for franchisors. I worked at Hardee's and Carl's Jr. I worked at Mrs. Fields' Famous Brands. I worked at Kitty Academy, where we built 10,000 square foot childcare facilities. I have been doing this for a very, very long time. I'm an expert in compliance, and I know lead generation, franchise sales process, and I guess we're going to talk about that now.
We are. Well, a fantastic introduction, Joe. And you don't look like you've been doing franchising any more than a couple of years. You look like a youngster, of course. So can't believe you've been doing
I'm a child. I'm a child. Just ask my wife. She'll tell you I'm a child.
Yes, I think I get the same things here. And before we get into today's subject, and I'm really looking forward to getting into this one, let's introduce a few people who've joined us live today. So we've got the ever wise Simon Wise, and he's put hello, franchise friends. Harvey is running about 10 minutes late due to technical gremlins. Well, you could call it that, but there you go. We're here now, so it's fantastic. Oh, that's you, Ed. Good stuff. I'm glad you're here. We've got Julie Waits, and Julie has been waiting patiently. That's good. Julie Waits. She's put thanks, Simon. Great to have you here, Julie. Looking forward to hearing your thoughts. We have the lovely Mara from Italy, and she's put, hi, everyone. I thought I was having an issue with the mobile app. No, you were having an issue with sorting this out. Mara has also put on here, hi Simon, hi Ed, and great to see you. And of course, Joe. Simon has put, hi Mara. And who else have we got? We have Mara again, and she's put, hi Joey. I think that's how she's pronouncing it. She's excited. I think we'll say that she's excited.
Well, Mara and I are friends. We're very, very good friends. I've talked to Mara many times.
Excellent, excellent. Well, Mara was a former guest, as was Ed, a former guest as well. Ed was a guest, I think, on about episode 2 of this. And Ed was another inspiration for me doing this, having done his fantastic podcast, The Disenfranchised. Yeah, it's fantastic. We have Natalia here as well, our resident legal beagle here in the UK. Great to have you here, Natalia. Looking forward to hearing your thoughts. And she's put, woohoo, we can see and hear you. Yes, you certainly can. We have a couple more that I'd like to introduce before we get into this. We've got David Sweeney from Dojo Pizza, I believe. Fantastic to have you here, David. And it's 8:30 in the evening and he's in Kenya. So fantastic. Great to have people from all over the world. This is what this show is all about, including everyone. We have the wonderful Penny Hopkinson, who wrote an amazing book, and I have a copy of it, and I always love to promote it, and it's the right way round. Great to have you here, Penny. Penny is one of our wonderful sponsors. Finally, we have a LinkedIn user. It's Gordon. So great to have you here, Gordon. And Gordon is on the M11. So great to have you listening in. Right, let's get into a question, and we can all have a stab at this. So we've got a question here from Simon. And Simon has put, do you sell or award a franchise? Or does it depend on where the franchisor life cycle you are? This is a great question, gentlemen. Let me throw this over to Joe first. What do you make of this one, Joe? Do you sell or do you award a franchise?
Well, I have gone over this sell versus award terminology for many years and many times. And my view is that there is no award. I mean, you don't get a little statue, you don't get a little prize when you buy a franchise. You get a lot of work, and you get a lot of stuff you have to do, and it can be a great opportunity and very rewarding, both personally and financially. But I think franchises are sold. But the caveat is that you must sell franchises to qualified people that meet the standards that the franchisor has for the 3 C's. And those 3 C's are character, capital, and capability. So once you have taken those 3 C's and translated them into what your ideal franchise candidate profiles are, because you can have more than one profile that fits, making sure that you are doing extensive vetting and screening and qualifying, then you sell them a franchise. Now, if you want to call that awarding, go ahead. But I think those standards must be there. So that's my view, and I'm curious to hear what Ed has to say.
Yeah, fantastic. Ed, what do you make of this one? Should we be selling or should we be awarding?
Neither.
Okay.
So from my perspective, it's probably more aligned to recruitment, and that's because I was recruited before as a franchise sales person or franchise recruiter, whatever you want to call it, right? And the reason I liken it to recruiting is when you're speaking to the prospect, you've got to sell to them, but you've also got to make the other element attractive to them as well. And when people use the word franchise sales or I'm going to sell to them, that always sounds to me like one-way traffic, like the franchisor telling them why it's great. If you're awarding, it's we're going to grill you until it's, until we're happy that you're suitable for us. But there's a two-way process, right? It needs to be two-way. And the closest aligned thing that I can find is is recruitment. So yeah, it's all about learning about the individual first, finding out if they are your ideal franchisee, or potentially your ideal franchisee, building that relationship together, and then at the end, it's some people like to call it a marriage. Franchising with a franchisee is like a marriage. Well, you don't award and you don't sell that relationship, do you? You kind of just find the right person, which now I'm saying it sounds a bit odd with recruitment, but you kind of find the right person, don't you? You go out there and find the right person, then work out together if it's going to be a good fit in a relationship. So yeah, to me, it's not selling or rewarding; it's somewhere in between. And recruitment's the closest thing I can think of that relates to that.
Absolutely. And Joe, I was going to ask you. You've both mentioned about, and I think this is a great place to start in this, about that ideal franchise profile, or profile as you put it, Joe. How do you go about as a franchisor trying to work out who your franchisee could be and what profile that might be? I mean, I'm sure there are a lot of tools, but are there some good sort of techniques you've used over the years for finding that out?
Yes, and just before I answer that, I do agree with Ed that franchise, that terminology, franchise recruitment, sales, franchise recruitment, marketing. I agree with that. Where I disagree a bit is on the sales piece. There are two kinds of sales: professional sales, where you're trading back and forth and there's negotiation and there's thoughtfulness. And then there's unprofessional sales, which is the cigar chomping, used car salesman, door-to-door vacuum cleaner guy. I'm talking about the professional selling. So there's a distinction there. But I absolutely agree with you. If you model your franchise sales after a recruitment model, that is very smart, and it will take you a long ways. To answer your question, Harvey, on your ideal franchise candidate profile, couple of ways to do it. It's going to be different for each franchisor, because if you're in a quick service restaurant operation that is like a Burger King or a Carl's Jr., it's going to be one thing. If they're going to be operating a smaller concern, a small retail shop, or a haircutting franchise, it's going to be a little bit different. But there are two main components to your ideal franchise candidate profile. One is the financials that you're looking for them, the amount of liquid capital and net worth you want them to have. And then you're going to measure that against, are they going to be a single unit operator, or are they going to be a multi-unit operator? And you can have two standards. You can have one for each of those and qualify them for that. On these, that it will vary a great deal. If you've got a franchise that, with 2 to 3 weeks of training for a retail operation, and that's sufficient to be able to operate because it's relatively easy operations, that's one standard. And you want to look for archetypes or profiles of people that match the attributes you're looking for. Who would be good at this? Do they have to be really good at sales, or do they have to be really good at managing people? And going back to Ed's example of recruitment, that's what you do in recruitment. In the more complex operations, where it's a quick serve restaurant, you may need somebody that has 5 or 10 years of general management. And if it's for multi-unit development, they may need multi-unit operational experience to come to the table. And then there's a third thing, and that is, you may not find those attributes and qualities in just one person. If you're trying to sign a 10-unit deal to build 20 units of a burger concept, it may be a financial partner and an operating partner. So you have to think a little bit more broadly, but you need to have those standards in order to measure against and to recruit for.
That's really interesting as well. And I'll get your take on this in a minute, Ed, actually, because I think that's really interesting to think about the fact that you might need several profiles. I've at the same time, to carry out a job of growing a particular business to a particular size, or even you may well find that somebody even who wants a single site, it might be better as they come in with a team of people or a couple of people that offer up different attributes. What's your view on that, Ed, while we're still on this ideal candidate? Do you think it's should be encompassed in one person, or do you like this idea of a sort of a team or a collection of people?
I think Joe's nailed it on the head already, that bit. So I'm gonna take it in slightly different direction and say, well, when you're starting to think about marketing to these individuals, if you go out and market on a more general basis and try and attract all of those different profiles, you're not going to speak to any of them. They're not going to fully feel like they're the exact match for your brand. So not for all brands, but for certain brands, I think it's really going to be important to nail down exactly that one profile. And this is probably more the single unit franchises, sure, right? Rather than the multi-units and the restaurant industry. But if you can almost put a job title to them, it makes that recruitment process even easier, right? Especially if you're going out there and using something like LinkedIn or Facebook. You can kind of almost put that picture I had it the other day. Some of them saying potentially a buyer would be a good match for their franchise. Well, that's great. You've got that job title. Now you know that you can advertise for someone similar coming from that type of background, and you can understand what their challenges are, what their fears are, what their problems are. So for a buyer, they may just be fed up of buying the same thing time and time again. So a new challenge might be something that really appeals to them. Mm-hmm. Typically, it's going to be things like taking control over their future and their career. So, stop earning for someone else and do it for yourself, or more time to spend with your family rather than, having that grind of buying pencils every day or whatever it is that they're doing, right? So you can start to use language that is going to appeal and attract to them more if you find and identify that ideal franchisee avatar, and I would say add even a job title to it. Discover and think about who they're going to be following and who their interests are. So the likelihood is they're going to be potentially looking at someone like Stephen Bartlett, right? Well, good. If you know that, then you know that maybe retargeting their audience, if that's possible, or commenting on his posts on social media is going to be a good thing and help you get visibility for your brand and get you in front of the right people. So work out who that exact person is, where they hang out, what their interests are, who they follow, what they do. Then when it comes to marketing, you've got a better picture as to where you can go and target them with the right messaging.
Great. No, absolutely. I mean, Joe, it's great to have these two perspectives. Actually, we've got a UK and a US perspective here. I mean, when you go about trying to find the potential candidates for a franchise business, do you use a mixture of different things to find those potential candidates? So let's say we've now nailed down those avatars, those profiles, whether it's one, whether it's a mixture of a couple of different profiles. Where do you go in the US to find those particular people?
Well, we utilize LinkedIn a great deal. We also actually we have a number of different lists in our database. So we're very focused on food. So we know who all of the current franchisees are in the food sector in pretty much North America. Along with that, we also know who all of the executives within those franchise or brands are, and in those large multi-unit franchisees. So if you're a chief operating officer and you're working for a franchisor, or you're a chief operating officer or a director level operator, you might want to become a franchisee in your own right. And so those are reasonable targets. We also have a database of franchisees generally in a wide variety of business verticals that we can market to. And then we can combine those things with lookalike lists on LinkedIn, paid LinkedIn marketing, and that type of thing. So, and we do events like this, and we get tremendous attraction on events like this. We do them from our company page because when we do them from our company page, we're able to get a CSV file list of all of the attendees. So we do that. And that way the franchisor can make them part of their, those expressions of interest, qualifying them as leads and then advancing them as prospects. That's what we hand off to them.
Yeah, absolutely. It's great to have a mixture of these different things to find the right people. And I think it's about aligning as well. We've got a few questions coming in, and a wonderful live audience here. I love to bring people in. This is what this show is all about. This show is about our community. And these conversations are just that. They're a conversation between the three of us, but also between our entire community. So let's have a look at a few questions that have come in and see what we both feel about these. We've got a question here from Julie, and Julie's put, how do you deal with a potential franchisee who has got the money and wants to proceed, but doesn't meet the profile avatar? This is a great one. Perhaps, Ed, you might want to take this one. So we've got somebody who they're desperately wanting to sign up, but they're not the right fit. They're not aligned. What should someone do? Is there something that they should do to help them feel more aligned, or is it just walk away time?
For me, it's just be honest. So we know that over time, the profile that we're after, at this point in time, we don't feel yours is quite right because of X, Y, Z. Now, I think then that gives them an opportunity to come back and say, well, actually, I am because of X, Y, Z. And you might find out there's a good match. If not, I think you just have to hold your ground and say, look, it is a two-way process. We need to make a match. And if we don't feel it's going to be right further on down the line, that's only going to cause more issues for you with your investment and us as well. And we don't want to see that happen for either of us. So that's probably where we end the call. I think the best thing you can do there is to be honest with people.
Yeah, of course. Absolutely. I mean, honesty is so important when you're dealing with the process of aligning and making sure people make a decision for the right reasons. What do you make of this question, Joe? How many times have you come up with somebody who's desperate to proceed and has clearly got the capital, one of the C's, and maybe they've got the capability? And let's go back to your 3 C's here. If somebody doesn't have one of the C's, is it a matter of working on that, see if you can get them into that position, or is it trying to find somebody who's better aligned?
Well, with the 3 C's, I mean, they're not all at equal levels all the time. Somebody might be very, very, very high on capability and character, and this is a little different than the question that was asked. And with that kind of candidate, and you say you'd make a great franchisee. You have been doing this your entire career, and your background checks came out great. You have great credit. You just don't have enough money to do it yourself. We could make this work if you could find yourself a financial partner to go into this with you. That's one solution, one remedy. I'm going to keep your application open. You start looking for a financial partner that wants to be in this business with you, and then we'll pick it back up. If it's as the questioner asked, as Julie asked, they have the money and there's something else that's wrong. If there's really no way to fix that. So you're probably done in your company. If the capability piece, and I'll translate it into this, you have an operation that requires training, and the person applying for the franchise says, well, I'm not going to go through training. In fact, I'm not even going to operate. I'm just going to hire a general manager. And in your model that just doesn't work, then you have to say no.
Mm. Yeah, absolutely. It's great to look at it. You've got the, whether it's the 3 C's or whether it's something else that you use, and you look for some simplicity there, and you see what's missing. And like you say, Joe, if it's character that's missing, that's a hard one to fill the gap. That really is a hard one. Or if it's passion or some of these more emotive words. But if it's capital, like you say, you can bring in a finance partner. If it's capability, you can bring in somebody with the experience and perhaps make it work. And I think it ties back again to what you said, Joe, at the beginning about the fact that there could be a couple of different, you might have 3 partners, one that's got the character, one that's got the capability, and one that's got the capital. So, great question there. Let's have another look. We've got some great questions here coming in from Simon, from Mara as well. So let's get into this. Let's get one from Simon here. I like this one. Simon Wise has put, is franchisee recruitment, whether that's sales or rewarding, we're going to say recruitment now for today's conversation, I think, is that an art or a science? And I like this question because I think science, is relying on more of perhaps a set formula, and a set way of doing things, and art's more listening and adapting and having a feel for things. Do you think it's a mixture of both? And let's put that one to Ed first.
So yeah, it's a mixture of both. At the end of the day, I think you want to have a solid franchisee recruitment process in place, a solid place to go and find people and churn them through as prospects into your funnel, and then each step of the way should be pretty similar, should be standardized throughout the franchise recruitment process. But within that process, I think there needs some flexibility, because at the end of the day, people are individuals, and it's really important. I was doing a workshop on this today, actually. It's important to ask questions first so you can understand their motivations, their fears. And then I believe and this is where it becomes a bit more of an art, right? You sort of freestyle almost, but you kind of guide them down the path of showing them what's most valuable to them. There's no point in talking to somebody who's a bit more technical perhaps and is comfortable with IT systems. There's no point selling them on the systems and how great they are and how they allow them to do this, because they're probably going to know it already, right? That technical person, the salesperson's probably not going to want to be sold to about sales necessarily. Some will, of course, but some of them will think, yeah, I'm all right at it. And actually they want to know the other bits of what's the delivery, what's the product, because I'm a good enough salesperson. I can sell anything as long as it's a good product. So you focus in on the product, but also it's like the franchisee stories as well. So from within your network, what franchisee is most closely related to that person's motivations, that person's fears. And so, yeah, there's a science to it in that it needs to be replicable. It needs to have a solid process. But also I think there's that a little bit of art to it and I think a lot of it's in listening. But the thing that I would say is what it's all about for me is, as with all sales and marketing, it's about being a good communicator. It's listening, understanding the other person, and then telling them the right information at the right time, not misleading them or forcing them. It's making it as informative as possible, but helping them to see the value, which is the art for me.
Definitely. Joe, what do you make about this? Is it art, science, or a mixture of both? What's your take on this? I love this question.
The science part is the franchise sales process. There's no question about that. The art part is the art of selling, and the art of selling is essentially asking the right questions and listening for the answers. And you need in most sales, but in particular in franchise sales, you need to uncover, and not necessarily in this order, the concerns, the objectives, and the ambitions of your candidates. Because if you cannot address, less likely to advance them to a franchise sale. You are much less likely to advance them in being a single unit or even a multi-unit franchisee if they don't see themselves doing this. And they won't see themselves doing it until their concerns, their objectives, and their ambitions are addressed.
Absolutely. And you've both made such valid points about asking good questions and really listening with intent to the answers to those questions, and seeing whether somebody is aligned. If you have just joined us today, this is the Franchise Show, and today we are talking about how to sell a franchise. Now, whether you are a franchisee looking to get into franchising, or whether you're a franchisor looking on how to promote their franchise, then this is a show that you can listen to, and if you're listening live, get involved in, and find out all about the process of getting involved with a franchise and doing that in the right way. So please put up your comments if you're here, and if you've joined us for the replay, please put a comment up, and we can always look at that in the future. Clever stuff. Let's have a little look. We're going to come to some questions by Simon and a comment by David, Sweeney, and Danny in a minute. But before we get on to that, we have both of you have touched on something that I think is a good thing to start to talk about now, which is the process, the sales process, and what that is for a franchisee and a franchisor. Ed, perhaps we could touch on this now, and I appreciate it depends on the franchise business in question. But what do you sort of make, or how do you help people create a sales process that's right for their business?
Okay, it depends, right? It's one of those ones that it depends on them and what stage they're at. But I think the worst situation that a franchise brand could be in is that they kind of don't know where they're taking somebody in the next step. So maybe they just speak to a prospect and go, hey, this is a good conversation. It's maybe taken 2 hours, and they don't know what the next step is, and kind of just freestyle it from there. The reason I say that is because a lot of people that are looking at a franchise as an opportunity for them are looking for some form of structure or process around them. If they see within the franchise recruitment process that there is no structure, subconsciously, it doesn't really give them loads of confidence. If you've got that process in place, if you've got the questions, and I mean even in your calls, have some structure to your calls and explain to them what is going to happen in this call, and then deliver on that, you're starting to subconsciously let them know that, okay, these guys mean business. They've got a process for everything. They're following it. Good. When I get into their organization, they're going to have that structure as well. But how I generally design these processes with people is through a workshop. I do a lot of analysis at the front end to see where the current state of play is, identify who their current franchisees are, do a mystery shop, things like this. And then we go into a workshop day where it is step by step. What's the first thing that's going to happen in this process? What's next in the process? What information do we need to drip feed in at each stage? And I say the worst thing is that they've got this airy-fairy, maybe 2 calls, then say, would you like to buy the franchise? You're asking people to make a big decision really quickly, and people don't. You need to build some trust in them. Yes, you can do that with some of your marketing, but even still, you need more touch points in that process so that you can give them a little bit of breathing time to think and come back with more questions, and you can help shorten the gap. It's a big leap for people to not all people, obviously investors, it's perhaps less, or it appears to be less of a gap, but for somebody leaving a career and going into a franchise, it's going to be a big gap for them to jump. So doing everything you can to close that gap is going to be important, and I just don't think you're likely to do that with 1 to 2 calls. I think it's a multiple stage process. So having that process, you can then tell them where they are and that they're not going to have to make that big jump. It's actually little steps that they're going to take along the way before it's big decision time,
Definitely. Joe, what about you on this question of the process that a franchisee goes through. I'm going to bring up, before you answer that, I am going to bring up a question here from Simon, because I think it's quite relevant, especially when we're talking here about the difference between the UK, which is the wild west of franchising and unregulated in a lot of degrees, and the US, where you're in a much more regulated environment with your franchise disclosure documents and all of these things. And let's do this in two ways. First of all, talk about the process that you might take, that a franchisee might go on that sales process, but also perhaps touch on whether that's harder with the regulation, or do you think some of that hinders the process?
Well, in the U.S. and in certain provinces in Canada, I think it can do both. But I'm more on the end of that the uniformity of having the standardization of disclosure documents, where the ones in the U.S. all have 21 items in it. They all have the same headings, and they either have a financial performance representation in their item 19 or they do not. It creates an easier path if people are shopping. Now, people don't always shop for franchises. Sometimes they're only looking at one and they aren't shopping at all. But, the more sophisticated multi-unit franchisees, they want the disclosure document early, and they want to start reviewing at the front end and not wait for it at the back end. And I'll just say Ed's description of architecting a franchise sales process is extremely similar to how we go about doing it. And the ones in the US are usually between 6 and 7 steps, and they're really stages, and then figuring out what happens at that stage, content, what you're trying to get out of the conversation with the prospect, and what you're trying to deliver to the prospect so they can help them make their decision is really, really important. But I think the nice thing is that with uniformity, it makes a much more level playing field. And within that sales process, you have to determine at what stage do you deliver the disclosure to the prospect and go over it with them. So there's a lot to it. I can't speak to whether not having a disclosure document is a good or bad thing, because I've always had one. So I can't tell you whether it's harder or easier in the UK.
I've helped and recruited internationally and in the UK. So I don't think it's major either way. Now, I'm not fully up to speed with the US one myself, but I know in other countries like France, they have a DIP, which is very similar. But the prospect is not allowed to sign the franchise agreement until they've had the DIP. I can't remember what that stands for because that's in French, but they have to have signed that. They have to have received it 28 days before they're allowed to sign the franchise agreement, to give them time to think it over and analyze it and all of these kind of things. So it's not a rash decision. And, ethically, that's really good. But from a franchise recruitment perspective, it can make that person potentially look at other opportunities, and that warm, hot lead that you had can drop off. That's the difference in the UK, is the process can keep on moving a little bit smoother, a little bit faster. The downside is, there's sometimes surprises later on down the line for that individual, where they go, oh, well, I didn't know that. So actually having that, like Joe said, that uniformity, that every brand has something at the front end, or at least as part of the process where they can analyze and see all this data, is really important. I would encourage franchise brands in the UK to take a look at creating something similar themselves. I know there's no regulation to do that, but there's nothing stopping them from creating something similar. So yeah,
absolutely. I just because we don't have to do something, it doesn't mean we shouldn't do something. And if it's the right thing to do, if it's the ethical thing to do, if it helps franchisees make informed decisions, and if it helps franchisors do the right thing and present their business in a way that's easier to understand, then it can be a good thing. And I think that it's a conversation that's always fantastic to have between experts in different regions, because you get that different perspective on these things. And actually, perspectives is something that I would like to get on to in a moment, and how we deal with and recommend getting different perspectives when we're going through that decision. But before I do that, I would like to make sure we've recognized everybody that is here. We have also got Jason Kaber here from SEO Samba. It's always great to have you here, Jason. Please let us know your thoughts on the recruitment process as we go through this conversation. We've also got Don Cohen here, and Don is a great friend of mine, taught me everything I know about LinkedIn Live. He's a legend himself, first guest on this show as well, and he's been enjoying a great selling franchise conversation. Well, yes, me too as well, Don, and thank you for being here. Oh, look, someone's answered your question, Ed.
Yeah, I thought there might be a couple of people.
Shall I try and pronounce this? Well, look, there it is on the screen.
Yeah.
There you go.
Right, yeah.
Well, look, this is one of the conversations that I would like to get into, and it's about perspectives. So when a franchisee is on that sales process, whatever that is, I'm going to put this to both of you. Do you encourage getting different perspectives? And when I say perspectives, I mean from other franchisees, from friends, from family. Is it a good idea to just stick with the people that you're doing business with and go through that process? Or is it a good idea to get lots of different perspectives? Will it help or confuse things? And I'll put that to Ed first.
Depends on who you are. I think if you're a franchisor who's just started out and you're on your own, you haven't got too many people to turn to, right? It can be a bit of a challenge. But maybe if you're involved with a finance provider, lender, maybe you can get their perspective as well, as to try and help round it out. But certainly if you've got a team within your franchise, even if it's one or two other people, they should be part of that recruitment process. In my mind, they should interview them as well. And maybe it's a good idea to structure it in such a way that there's a almost seniority. I like to think of it as kind of gamification. If things go well with this conversation, you'll be able to speak to your area director, the person who's going to be supporting you on a day-to-day basis, or the founder, if that you're not the founder speaking to them. So really good to speak to them, but also interviewing them allows that person to feel like they're achieving something if they get past that level. So I've probably gone a little bit off topic, but those perspectives then can feed back in and say, right, what's great about this person is this. Did you know that about them? I discovered that they've got this in their background, or this is a motivation that wasn't brought up in the notes before. And that then it can allow you to formulate how you add value to the process in the next step. So you can speak to that individual about things that are important to them and help them understand why your opportunity is good. So that collaboration behind the scenes should work really well.
Definitely. Let's come to you now, Joe. And in fact, I've put this question up here from Mara, or this comment from Mara, because I think it feeds in quite nicely to our conversation about perspective. And Mara's put, Joe, how about family support? Do you think it's something that needs to be taken into consideration? I mean, we're talking here now about perspectives, and how important, Joe, is it that the family of the individual that's involved, especially let's talk single site here, perhaps, rather than multi-site operations. How important is it to get that family perspective and indeed other perspectives on this journey?
I think it's very important when you're talking about single unit development, especially with first-time franchisees, and because the money that they're putting into it may be all the money that they have. or at least they're risking all the money that they have, and getting your partner, your spouse, their involvement. It's a missed opportunity for a franchisor not to have someone's spouse or partner in on the calls from the very beginning. It's a mistake. And that opportunity, because you might find out that they might be a very valuable part of the actual operation of the business, but you will never know that unless they're involved in the process. So getting them there is important. For the prospective franchisee, with the help of a very good franchise salesperson that understands what the dynamics of relationships within the franchise and relationships for the franchisees, should be focused on getting buy-in from the spouse. Now, you as the franchise salesperson, you can help that, but the primary person that's going to be the franchisee has to get that buy-in. But you can assist them in doing so. But it is vital. Could you imagine, Harvey, your wife not wanting you to run a coffee house and saying, "I hate coffee, to hell with your coffee, I'm never coming to see you in your coffee house"? That would be a bad thing.
It would definitely be tricky. Definitely, yes. She's got to be on board.
Can I just add something there to what Joe was talking about?
Please
I think he's right. Getting the spouse in as early as possible is really important, because otherwise the prospective franchisee has got to sell secondhand, and they don't know the business as well as you know the business. And so, yeah, try and get that direct connection with them. Otherwise, they're getting the information secondhand, and it's less likely to hit home as well.
Absolutely, you've got to work out who you're selling to or who you're talking to, and what's important to the collection of people that make the decision. You know, in sales, you've got to work out who's the decision maker in that. And when somebody is coming in as a prospective franchisee, is it just them? Is it, you know, in some cases, you know, perhaps an older relative, maybe a business partner? You know, who is it that advises, and who are you trying to appeal to? So I think it really, really valid points there. We are starting, these conversations always fly by, and today's been a really fabulous conversation. Such a fantastic balance between these two perspectives on what is really important in this franchise journey. What we got here from Mara? Have we got time for one more? Let's have a look. Let's touch on this one. Do we ask for a CV? I mean, this touches on one of the three C's there, perhaps the capability. And maybe you've added another C here with a CV or a resume. Let's use the other word for that. What do you think about this, Joe?
We
do
don't
you think
want to use Latin. We don't want to say curriculum vitae.
Ah, look, he knows. You see, he can speak the Latin. Excellent stuff, Joe. I knew you wouldn't let me down there. But I mean, what do you think? Do you think it's a good idea as a prospective franchisee, when you're looking to embark on this journey, to sort of put who you are and what you do down in, not necessarily a CV, but in some sort of document that says, this is who I am? And is it up to you as a franchisee to sell yourself to that franchise business? Big question with 2 minutes to go, isn't it?
I've always had very well constructed applications that we use with franchisors. So you might get a lot of that resume information from that. And now that we have LinkedIn, you know, if they have a fully fleshed out LinkedIn profile, you get a lot of information. In fact, you might get more information from their LinkedIn profile than you would get from your own application. I have had prospective franchisees include their CV or resume with their application. That's nice. As a requirement, I don't think in their capability, then maybe you say, can you send me your resume too? I'd like to take a look at that. If that's just being good at qualifying your candidates and making sure they meet your standards.
Yes, yeah, absolutely. But in that, like you said, Joe, in that conversation, you can often extract information that would be on a CV, but you can do it in a way where you're building a relationship, and it's a two-way thing, and it's perhaps a better way of doing it. Finally, before we wrap things up, Ed, what do you make of this? Do you think there should be a structured way that a franchisee should present themselves to a franchisor, or is it more up to the franchisor?
I'm an ex-recruiter, of course I want a CV, like,
Yeah, that's it.
and I'd ask it before you get on a conversation with them, as part of it. I'd say, could you send over the CV so I can prepare fully for the conversation, so I know a bit about you. You've had all this time to think about us and learn about us on our website, maybe brochure, whatever it is that you've received. Let me have a little bit of a head start, and it'll help us to speed up the conversation, the first conversation that we have. Now, of course, you still want to drill down, because in my experience, people don't put everything on their CV. On their CV, they look fantastic, right? They're always amazing. Everything's great. But actually, when you dig into it, you realize that a person's experience is not about what's written on a piece of paper. A lot of it is about how they interact. Like I say, communication skills, I think, so important. And I think even just as much so for any franchisee. And so if they've got a great CV, but they can't communicate, they might, depending on the franchise and the setup, but they might struggle. I think they're likely to struggle when trying to build out a business, because a lot of it's about people.
Absolutely. I am going to quickly end, because we have come to our sort of 50-minute time slot for this. But David's put, I spend more time trying to tell people that they are not suitable. I love the John West strapline. It's the fish John West rejects that makes John West the best. This is all about tuna fish, but an interesting one. If something isn't right, and if through going through that process, either way, you've discovered that it's not right for you, if you're a franchisor or a franchisee, then that's no bad thing to discover something isn't right, and perhaps something else out there is. So look, today has been a fantastic conversation. I've loved every minute of it. And before we talk about what's going on next week, I'd like to give both Joe and Ed an opportunity to let people know the best way to get in touch with them, and let people know what it is they do. So I'm going to start with you, Ed. What's the best way to get hold of you?
Send me their CV. So LinkedIn's always a good place to get hold of me. I'm on there as Ed Purnell, or an email to ed@thefranchised.com.
Fantastic. Thank you very much, Ed. And the same to you, Joe. What's the best way to get in touch with you if people want help on their franchise journey, whatever that might be?
Well, if you're an established franchisor outside the United States and you've proven your concept and you want to come to the United States, you are more than welcome to contact me. My partner, Ned, has brought international brand, the Hardee's and Carl's Jr. brand to 40 different countries around the world. So we have some expertise there. If you're a domestic North American franchisee, a franchisor rather, in Canada or in the United States, you can contact me as well on your franchise sales process, your marketing. We do straight advisory services too. And the best way is on LinkedIn or joe@franchisorsales.org. And you'll get that if you connect with me on LinkedIn too.
Fantastic. And what I will do is either myself or one of you two lovely gentlemen can put those links in the comments of this episode, and people can go to that now or in the distant future if they wish. So just to let you know a few things that are coming up before we finally conclude. This Thursday is the beginning of season 4 of Franchising Brand Stories. And we're going to be kicking things off with Dan Archer and hearing what's under the hat of Visiting Angels, which is a franchise here in the UK. So it's going to be a fantastic story to hear. I'm really looking forward to that one. That will be 5:15 GMT, 12:15 EST this coming Thursday, the 14th, I believe. Yes, 14th of November. And please join us next week on the Franchise Show, when we will be talking to Mark Harmon all about franchise filming. And that will be November the 19th, 5:15 GMT, 12:15 EST. So until next time, my friends, take very good care. Cheers.